Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being nice and prompt and on time. We are just going to give it a minute or two for people to join, and then we'll make a start. Just give it till 1 or 2 minutes past, and then we'll get going. See, yeah, now people are trickling in. Perfect. We'll just give it a minute or so. But please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're coming from today. Okay, I think we'll make a start. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Corcoran, and I'm the head of service delivery and implementation here at Charity Digital. So, I'll be your host throughout the webinar and would like to give you a very warm welcome to today's session. As I just mentioned, please do introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you are joining us from today. Our webinar today is entitled Roles and Expectations of the Modern Charity CFO and will be led by Hobby Dean, Senior Solutions Consultant at Sage. In this webinar, we will share insights from Sage's Secrets of Successful CFOs research and discuss how better data, automation, and emerging AI capabilities can help finance teams reduce manual effort, improve reporting, and make more confident decisions, while staying focused on accountability and the charity's mission. But first, a quick introduction to Charity Digital for those who don't know us too well. So, we are a registered UK charity, and our mission is to help other charities increase their impact by being more digital. So, just before we start, I just want to share a few house rules and pointers for today's session. So, the session is being recorded and will be uploaded to watch on demand within a week's time. Any slides that are shared together with any resources will also be made available, so don't worry if you've missed anything, we will send those round. Closed captions are available for today's session. So to enable these, on the bottom of the Zoom window, click the up arrow button next to closed caption and press show subtitles. During the webinar, please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A section, which is located on the Zoom menu bar for Hobby to address at the end of the presentation. If someone asks a question that really resonates with you, you can upvote it. So simply click on the thumbs up icon next to it, and that will automatically upvote it, and we'll get to those questions first. And finally, if you encounter any sound or image issues, please let us know in the chat, and we'll do our very best to get the session back to normal as soon as we can. So without further ado, I will hand over to Hobby.
Thanks very much, James. Thank you for all joining this afternoon. I specifically wanted to talk about roles and expectations of the modern charity CFO, because having the privilege of worked in finance for a while and now seeing how charity CFOs are evolving, I thought I'd like to share the experiences. And I've been lucky, it's not just me doing this in isolation as part of my job, but also seeing how CFOs are evolving with the charities that I'm typically working with. So I wanted to share some of that experience with you. I think the most important thing that I've come across, and this is from charity CFO roundtables, other meetings, events I've been to, etc. Everyone obviously expects you to do the finance bit. That's a given. But more and more organizations are having the CFOs involved in a lot of other areas. This includes things like looking at what ITs are out there, looking at artificial intelligence, because again, CFOs are starting to get involved more and more in terms of the technology infrastructure. Traditionally, always no, leave it with IT, and for larger organizations, that's probably still the case. But for smaller organizations or medium-sized organizations, they are involved in a lot more there. Also, in terms of HR and payroll and recruitment, again, traditionally they've never been involved, but from the round table, it was like people saying, well, we haven't got somebody to help us with this. We need help in working in these areas themselves. Regulations and compliance, that's a given, that you will always look at that to make sure from a finance perspective you're spot on with that. But also in terms of regulations with the charity sector, generally, it's about making sure you're catching that. Governance as well. But again, we're starting to move into areas where traditionally the finance CFO has never been involved, or the finance team generally. So even looking at your property and housing stock, if you're in social housing, looking at your fundraising. I remember 2-3 years ago when I was first starting to do these presentations, when I used to do presentations of my solution, I'd walk in the meeting and the trustees didn't know what finance were doing. Finance didn't understand what fundraising was doing. There was always like, no, it's somebody else's job. It's never mine. But that's now all changed as well. And also, industry-wide agendas are also becoming important. Things like the ESG agenda, and I'm going to talk about that in a little while as well. But what I was trying to emphasize here is my own experience and my experience with my peers and other people I'm talking to. The CFO role has changed so much. Now, just to support that even further, Sage did some research and talked to a number of CFOs, about 1,200 around the world, to sort of say, is this just something that's happening in the UK? It's not just exclusive to charity CFOs, it is exclusive to CFOs no matter where you are. So I just wanted to share some of the research that we got from there. So again, a lot of this may or may not resonate with you. But in terms of the challenges faced by the CFO, and you will get a copy of this report, this will come to you with the slides as well. We sampled 1,200, as I said, finance leaders around the world. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of these challenges resonate with everybody, in all organizations, all styles, types, etc. So you are juggling more and more responsibilities. There's always this looking at new tech. I don't even need to, I'm looking at tenders and straight away people are saying, have to look at AI, have to look at AI, or look at technology. More automation items are coming through. But again, this is aimed at CFOs, and I found it quite interesting to sort of see how diverse the CFO remit is becoming. And this is only about just over a year old now, this research, and we're about to do another one. But again, they're involved in retaining talent, they're involved in more risk management, digital gaps, etc. So it was quite interesting looking at this to sort of think, well, the traditional CFO has got to learn more and more about what's going on in the market. So what makes a successful CFO and certainly able to handle a lot of the things that are happening right now? So we looked at the typical activities in a normal week. And again, you might resonate with all this as well. And what's really interesting is you can see my indicators at the top are people that class themselves as very successful, but also other CFOs who didn't put themselves in that area. Obviously, everything was finance. That's where their top priorities are. But when you start looking at the wider remit, they are educating themselves more in other areas because they're becoming familiar that, I have got to learn this. There was at one point I could give it to IT, I could give it to other people and they would take responsibility. Now I've got to take charge of that. I've got to look at way people are troubleshooting and problem solving in wider areas, not just in my areas. So, trying to understand, do I need to change procedures? Is the way we're paying for services, etc.? all different now. So getting more and more involved in the weeds, whereas before it used to be that's that area, as long as we're talking to each other in the right way, passing over the right information, that's what counts. And even more interesting in the talent management is being backed up, recruiting, onboarding, skilling and upskilling. That is becoming more of an issue, and I'm going to touch on that in a few minutes as well. So your typical activities that you're undertaking as an organisation, but also I thought this was interesting, given that how technology is evolving, how the role of the CFO is evolving as well. If you break down those individual tasks that we saw on the earlier screen and just sort of said, where do you see yourself as an organization over the next 3 years? So it's quite interesting. All the things you'd expected, of course, people are going to be doing more of them. Some were even going to do the same and keep that way as well. But the interesting reading is less. So that presented an interesting situation. Is it because resources are being reduced, or is it because there's expectation that technology is actually going to make that difference for people as well? So I don't have to worry about doing all the financial reporting because the system's going to start generating that for me. And certainly AI will start delivering some of those things, or we're going to work in partnership with resources that are going to make that available. So there could be a whole heap of reasons as to why some things would be less. And I think it's fair to say, based on my experience and experience of my peers, there is a market expectation that technology is going to more automate activities. It's going to use AI to do more of the mundane work. And certainly there's enough research in the market that says in the charity sector, where you've got problems recruiting, people are using AI to help with things like presentations, putting forward business cases, and presenting which way should I be doing fundraising. So people are definitely using a lot more AI in the charity sector. But my caution on that is always fact check before you action any of that activity. So as I said, it was worth looking at what activities and how things are going to change over the next 3 years. What's also starting to happen is people are networking. As I said, a few years ago, I would quite regularly go into a meeting and I'd be talking to different people like your finance, your fundraising, your operations, and that none of them would ever talk to each other. Whereas now they're all in the same room at the same time with the same agenda in most cases. And sometimes it's just about educating people so they follow the same agenda. So with that in mind, people are networking more internally, but also externally as well. And that's really important because whilst we work within the charity sector, the reality is we can put into practice things that happen in the commercial because money's getting tight and we're trying to deliver more for less. We do need to think like a commercial organization to understand how can I best use my money, because all commercial organizations are always on about productivity, efficiency. Why can't we execute some of that within the charity sector and get better results and returns on the limited money that we actually have? And I certainly professionally, I'm going to more and more events. I'm going to more and more webinars. I'm, attending things happening in my community as well, for the local Chamber of Commerce and specialist areas for special professionals as well, because that's the nature of where we are. People are learning from each other and championing and supporting each other, which is really useful because it helps us build something very powerful for ourselves personally, but also for us as an organization. And this I thought was interesting, a bit of tongue in cheek as well, but based on fact from the research that we did. Top skills that different people need for different types of setups. So of those that class themselves as successful, it was quite interesting because they put priorities on the problem solving skills. That was important. And yet when you look at it on general CFOs, they put that down as number 2, which I thought was really interesting. Again, leadership skills that followed in both of these patterns, and understanding tech and systems. that appeared more in the successful than it didn't on the general CFOs as well. So I found that research quite fascinating. But the one thing that stood out to me was the confidence. And that's that whole thing about fake it till you make it, because a lot of the people we spoke to seemed to imply that's what they need to do. They need to walk into a room, make out they know what they're talking about. If I can give that confidence, then I might be able to get a different answer, or the answer I'm looking for. And that does work in some scenarios, certainly in a commercial world that I've worked in. That's exactly what people are looking at you for advice. And if you can come across as being confident, then that's also going to help you be successful, because it's all about networking, getting knowledgeable, getting educated, and getting the right things. But the most important thing is it's about the level of skills and what's needed. And to be fair, CFOs have this, but it's to different degrees, and it depends on the environment you're working in as well. So it's worth kind of thinking about what else can you do. But one of the things I've always picked up is talk to your peers, talk to other people. I certainly learn a lot from attending amazing events that Charity Digital do. I was saying just before you all joined the call, it was great to talk to people like from the National Cybersecurity. It was my first introduction into AI. Until then, I'd heard about it. It's a lovely thing, but I never actually totally understood it. And that's the beauty of attending events that Charity Digital and other organisations are holding as well. So bearing that in mind, why does any of this matter? I feel that in this day and age, a lot of people are trying to deliver more for less. So I've already touched on some of the reasons why, but certainly when I went to this round table, the CFOs made it very clear, certainly in the charity sector, without hesitation, you've got to be a jack of all trades, or Jill of no, or all trades as well. You've got to be involved in every aspect, because you're trying to coach the wider team to understand the financial impact of some of the decisions you're making. But at the same time, you've got to deliver a financial sustainability plan as well to keep yourselves going, because that's for the greater good of everybody. It's not just a personal thing. You've also got to bear in mind you are delivering more for less. And I don't just mean in terms of the funding cutting down. My own experience and working with, again, my peers has been that not only is something like the public sector organisations giving you less money, there were some sessions where the CFOs I was talking to were saying not only they're not going to help us with this initiative, they're actually passing the whole thing back to us. So we've got to get upskilled, we've got to go on the right courses, we've got to provide this range of services. Otherwise, they're not going to refer anybody to us. And I was saying, why is that a problem? It's because we never did that. We never had those skills. It was always done by that other organization. So again, as a CFO, it's about understanding what that's going to cost, what the implication means, and obviously working with the various stakeholders internally. And as it says here, staying on top of things is really important, because if you don't, and again, this is exactly what the CFO roundtable said, it does mean you've got difficult decisions in that you are going to be reducing or cutting the services that you offer. And we all know either you as an organization or other charities have had to literally look at all the services they provide and work out where they can make the biggest impact. And if it means that, regretfully, they have to drop certain services, that's exactly what they are doing. Okay. So how do I enhance my skills? As I said before, you guys are all talented without hesitation anyway, but it's about how can I enhance that? How can I change what I do and the value that I can add working with a wider audience as well? So, one of the key things that we found is constantly reevaluate your organization's mission. What is it you're trying to achieve? And there's no harm in looking at all these metrics, either short, medium, or long term. You've got to do that because short term is great, but you've still got to think so far ahead. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to deliver the complete service. So what is your mission? What monies do you need to survive? You've already got your financial sustainability plan. Is there anything else you need to think about? Is there any other funding sources? There are organizations, and I think I've said it myself, think about alliances you can set up. Who can you partner with? Do you need some key person in a certain market to sponsor you or to support you? Would that attract new people as well? That's what you really need to do, and start thinking about that. So again, it goes back to the networking, trying to find out who would be online with your brand as well, because that's also important. Pick the wrong person, it could be very costly on lots of levels. What skills do you need? So I talked a few seconds ago about the councils sometimes offering lock, stock and barrel. You're going to have to deliver this service now. And as a consequence, you've got time to, you need to give yourself time to upskill, almost plan your own business, create your own business plans. Is this going to work? Are we going to be able to do this? Is there going to be any downtime, any implications because funding is being redirected somewhere else? So, think about that. What are the costs of those skills coming on board as well? How do you attract more monies? It was really interesting when I first moved into the charity sector that in the commercial world, I didn't think twice about talking to organizations and say, would you like to sponsor this? Would you like to sponsor that? And when I first moved into the not-for-profit area, people were like, oh, can't ask that. That's not allowed. And when I said, why not? And they were like, well, because it's not the done thing. Well, why is it not the done thing? And what I found is that the more charities start to talk with commercial organizations, with other organizations, philanthropists and everybody to try and get more money, they were quite receptive to it. And they meant that the money that they actually had, they could focus on other things as well. But again, one of the things I always say and emphasize, be careful where that money comes from, because you've got your governance. You've got to prove that the money you're getting is whiter than white. The way you're using that money is done in the right way, and it's completely transparent. So be careful, because attracting more money does come with a downside, which is if something goes bad, it's your own charity that can get reputational damage as well. And then also, how do you assess your performance? Now, I know I've talked about this in a previous session as well. It's about capturing the right metrics, and it's about making sure people understand your performance and they can see how good you are, what the brilliant services that you're offering as well. So people want to see that, because if they see you using the money in the right way, internally and externally, they're more encouraged to get you some more money, get you more support, etc. And all this is going to drive how the CFO is going to work in that scenario as well. So just to give you some hints and tips about things you can do, is look at the way you're doing fundraising. Look at the different types of funders you can have. Again, we're talking about different generations and how they want to target, because a lot of charities still only target the usual, will you give me money every month type of approach. But some generations want to have a targeted thing. The last time I did a webinar here, I had my friend on here from Sadie Jones from She Beasts. When she puts something together, she makes it a very clear focus. I want to get gym kit, I want to get this, and then people feel they're really making a difference by contributing to that specific action, and they get a sense of satisfaction and they can see the results as well. And Sadie's very good at passing that information back. But as she said on the last call, she targets specific individuals for specific amounts of money. And that's what we're trying to point out here. Look at the different generations, see the kind of drivers and what kind of things they want to work with. It can make all the difference. I talked a little bit earlier about having an ESG agenda. Now, again, why does this matter? There's lots of commercial organizations out there that need to demonstrate their corporate social responsibility. So partnering up with a charity, looking at a difference, etc. And there are they want to prove that, hey, we're ethical as a company, and they will look out for partnerships, or you can go to them and say, hey, why don't you partner with us? You could be a sponsor, you could do XYZ with us, you can work with us on these initiatives. Now, obviously, ESG is quite important because it's covering environmental, social, and governance. But as you know, if you're a certain size, you've got to start reporting on some of this information if you haven't done so already. But there are so many ESG agendas out there. You've got to find the right one that's for you. Some of it is being mandated for you. Some of it is, no, you pick which is right for you. And as long as you're doing that, why does that matter? Because it does attract funders. It does bring more money into the organization. It might cost to set that up, depending on what you choose from that initiative, but it means that people will possibly sponsor you more ethically as well. And again, the most important thing is be careful. Again, I'm going to move on to AI, but here's an example. I went to an event. This chemical company published their ESG credentials and, made them out to be absolutely amazing. Somebody pushed that through to AI and said, how do these credentials stand up? It didn't look good in any way, shape, or form. They verified the facts, etc., and it was proven not to be a true representation of the report that they presented. So be careful. Make sure if the information was genuinely wrong, find out when you're verifying the facts, find out where that information is held. And then if it is incorrect, have it fixed. If it's not incorrect, be careful because somebody else could be doing that research and as a key thing, misrepresenting what's going on. But ESG is another big way that people are looking at trying to attract funders. Look at your technology. I've told you from the previous slides that, try and target specific technology because Gen Z are more technical and they want you to talk to them pretty much on their phone. Whereas the other generations, no, I'm happy for me to go onto your website, self-serve that way, or I still want a traditional, can you send me a newsletter in the post? So it's always worth looking at your technology to sort of see, is there anything you can do digitally to improve the money? Because let's be honest, it's about money coming in. Why does it relate to the CFO? Because the CFO's got to try and understand where people are coming from, why it matters. But the most important thing is about communicating that plan as well, making sure people are completely au fait with why they're introducing the new technology rather than it being imposed. There's enough research that proves if you just impose that technology, nobody's really going to adopt it because they've got no incentive to adopt it. And again, in our research, it was quite interesting what areas people were interested in. And at the moment, even in the not-for-profit today, cybersecurity is number one because cybersecurity is not always set up in a lot of not-for-profit organizations. So it's really important that you set that up. I was lucky enough at being introduced by Charity Digital to key representations at the National Cybersecurity team. And they came and did a presentation with our customers, all ranging from small charities to large charities. And they gave them some hints and tips in terms of how to secure your environment. Because again, even though it's not your fault, people hear about cybersecurity attack on your charity and organization, that can cost you money as well. So there's a balancing act in terms of, some of the technology you want to introduce. So make sure cybersecurity is number one, certainly in the not-for-profit area. But then obviously there's all these others. Work out which is a priority for you, and that's the one that you could take on. And even here, we were looking at machine learning, we're looking at predictive models, we're looking at AI. So as an organization, and definitely not for profit, I would heavily recommend do cybersecurity first. Based on some of the customers we talked to, we've had situations where people are set up, they didn't set up cybersecurity, they can't get their reports out, and they're still doing all their reports manually on Excel until they've finally got a system. but they can start to control exactly how they wanted to access the systems. Okay. And I thought it'd be interesting to sort of ask AI how not-for-profit CFOs should start using AI. So it was quite interesting in terms of the range of information that came up, which I think was really powerful, but also knowing what's happening in the market as well. There was quite interesting how AI set the scene and then the reality. So always check the two areas. So here is obviously about capacity protection and efficiency. And one of the things I always try and do is validate and sorry, I can't even speak now. Verify and validate the information that is being presented to me. So here you can sort of see, this is just my extract from ChatGPT, and you can sort of see, you know, what the capacity would be in terms of restricted funds and grant compliance. And that was interesting for me because there are some products out there that can do that within the core finance system. It doesn't need to be outside the finance system. And again, what the risks are, even obviously down to cash flow. Some systems out there are great at doing that out the box, and also board and trustee decision support as well, because very often the board and trustees are just given flat file information that says here's a state, but helping them to analyze, drill through to the information, see the underlying projects and activities that are going on will help. And then obviously things like governance and assurance and audit readiness, but also strategic. That was quite interesting, certainly in the not-for-profit sector, because a lot of your peers were typing in, you know, which direction should I be heading for this kind of service or this kind of return, or getting more financial sustainability, getting more funding. So it was quite interesting watching that. And also being, you know, what are the be carefuls, if you like. So here, I thought these last 2 points were really powerful when you're using AI. So be careful. Certainly when you're looking at the data quality and the integrity, that example I gave you about somebody advertising their ESG credentials and then suddenly it being disproved on every level didn't do that organization very good, because a lot of people were using AI to check the credentials and checking for greenwashing. And then they countered it by putting in the real view of that report. Watch the clear boundaries between AI recommendations and human decisions. A lot of products will let you use AI, which is great, but check the results, because don't forget, AI models are still learning, constantly learning. They're learning new things all the time, or depend upon the time learning that's been set up on the system. But you always have to, at this stage still, you have to have a human decision. Somebody that physically looks at those reports says, is that accurate? Somebody that might need to double check that what you're presenting is factually correct. That's also going to lead to ethical investigations, explaining, making sure things are auditable. I was quite shocked that although there's a lot of products in the market who do lots of AI, brilliant work, but it's not actually tracked in an audit record. So how do we know people are doing the right thing when they're using AI? That's worth capturing there as well. Cost and discipline as well, value realization. That's a good exercise to sort of say, right, I'm thinking of doing X, Y, Z. What's the cost in this situation, that situation? Almost like scenario modeling through AI, and that's perfect if you haven't got a modeling and a scenario planning solution available to you in your solution portfolio. But again, always fact check, always make sure that the information that's being presented to you is accurate. And the way you can do that is to always say verify. If you verify, you can actually look at where that information is coming from, and you can go into that link and say, is that a true representation, or fact check the things it was looking at. But this was quite an interesting one, because there's lots of organizations out there. You've only got to read the press. I'm not going to name individual organizations, where some places people are using AI as a cost cutting tool. There's lots of organizations think, oh, I don't need people to do X, Y, Z. That's not the reality. A lot of people are still needed to do certain jobs. AI is typically being used to support finance areas, to help you fact check, to do a few things that you haven't got the resources for doing. Like, for example, when I first started to work with AI, I could ask AI to tell me the answer to something, but it would never create the presentations for me. It would never put the business case together. But because AI is moving so fast, it's starting to do that now. So that's good. But at the same time, you still got to fact check it. Don't allow it to automate certain decisions. Some organizations who clearly don't want to advertise what's going on, but they have made decisions without fact checking and looking at all the information. The deploying AI with trustee understanding, I thought that was quite interesting, because it depends on which organization you're working with, and whether does the trustee really need to know, or is the trustee literally just signing off on what I'm telling them? Do they need the education? In some cases, absolutely. In other cases, no, not really. I've had somebody blatantly tell me, no, the trustees just need to know our end reports and that's it. But also be careful where the data is poor. It's that same old garbage in, garbage out. Be careful about that, because it is about making sure that you will only get the quality back that was actually invested in the original solution. So again, watch that. And again, I was asking lots of other questions, not just how you should use AI. How should you help with planning? What should you factor? What should you not? There's lots of ways you can use AI and support yourselves as a CFO, but also in the charity sector as well. Here's the reality of how organizations like mine are using AI as the most prominent technology. We are helping with things like financial forecasting and planning. We can plan, as I was saying before, you can plan different scenarios that may not appear in your models and things like that. So you can start doing that. Automation of routine tasks without hesitation. There's very few products out there that won't digest certain types of documentation. So I can't remember the last time somebody actually physically entered a purchase invoice unless it was handwritten. Everything else is now coming in automatically. Half of that is OCR technology, half of that is using AI tools and things like that. Having AI to help you with decision making, but using real-time data, not just a moment in time. It's merging the data sources that you've got. Obviously, as it said there, the risk management and compliance is really important as well. Cost optimization, I thought that was quite interesting, but when I looked at the detail behind that, it's looking at things like cash flow, money coming in, money coming out. So not at all what that last slide was saying about, don't use it to reduce staff and things like that. So look at it from a cost optimization point of view, in terms of like, how much cash flow have I got coming in? Am I due a grant? Am I going to get some extra funding? How should I allow for that? How can I project forward to sort of say, what do I need? And that links into the next one, which is cash flow management. And again, also help with the strategic business growth. Even though all these are there, always fact check them. Until the quality of the data gets better, you're always going to have to keep checking unless you have confidence in that data. So it's always important. Getting the right metrics is really important, because everything we're doing in the finance world is based it on facts. So again, in our report, there was always the ability to capture different metrics to help you with different decisions. So we've already touched on some of these, but it was quite interesting that without hesitation, 91% says, well, we have to obviously create the financial metrics, but also we're starting to capture other things like customer satisfaction, ESG metrics, and obviously the usual metrics you need as an organization, things like the gender pay gap. But again, how do you capture a lot of this information? You almost need to take a step back and say, as an organization, what do I need to capture? Why? And who's it aimed at? So here are just some metrics that we've captured. And again, there's lots of systems that are out there. So I need to capture the grants that I've got. But when you're looking at the metrics, you can be statistical, financial. It could be having an indicator to tell me whether it's a positive direction or a negative direction. So we've got more money coming in through income, maybe the services, but our grant funding is going down. So what do I need to do about that? And we can compare it. So these are all examples of screens where you can capture different metrics, and it's all about capturing the right information to make those informed decisions, whether it's real time, ideally, or it could be at a moment in time as well. So here's one example. Here's fundraising campaigns. How much is it costing us to run certain campaigns? We talked about the ESG agenda. I did this literally for a client of ours who didn't want to go full tilt on the ESG agenda. They wanted to start weaning people into the idea that they've got to capture ESG statistics. So they just capture some quick high level percentages. They didn't want to go into detail. And again, as I said, how your campaign is running. But those statistics are not just internal, they've got to be external. I do a lot of research on lots of charities for different reasons. And I find it really off-putting. And if you know some of the different generations that access the information and want to know, I want to invest in this charity, if I've got to go on a hunt just to find out where the money's going, how they're spending my money, there was one statistic that definitely Gen Z was saying that if I can't access it within no more than 3 clicks, I'm not interested, I'm moving somewhere else. And that's becoming more and more prevalent, the more digital we're getting. But if you can get this information, something like this, like British Heart Foundation do, Cancer Macmillan, and there's loads of other organisations that do this as well. But what I was trying to emphasise is capture the key metrics and work backwards and push it out to the different target audiences in the most simplest, most good graphical way, so people can see very clearly where their monies are going to. So just coming up to the end now, how can we empower ourselves as CFOs? What do we need to do to make us go on a personal level better, support the roles that we do, support the expectations of the wider organization? Obviously, without hesitation, carry on doing the brilliant work that you're doing in finance already, because that's what you're accountable for. But start educating yourself on everything that's going on around you. So almost do a 360. You know, how's the staffing going? How's the finance going? How's the fundraising going? Look at everything and keep an eye out. So, for example, just to give you an example of that, e-invoicing. E-invoicing in this context is not just I want to be able to scan in my invoices. If I'm a charity, and charities are not excluded from this, and my turnover is over 30 million euros, you've got to be invoicing compliant by June this year. So you haven't got long. And that's the kind of things that people need to be aware of. Sometimes it's great because you can be informed of that. Sometimes you've actually got to find that information available to you. Make sure you network, not only internally because you can see what the drivers are, but also externally as well, because there's a lot of information out there. I talk to quite a few people in the charity sector, introduce them to people in the commercial sector, talk about lots of other options of how they can support each other, whether it's on processes, whether it's how do you target this organization or how do you target this range of funders, and making sure we get the best information out of that. Always evaluate everything you do on a regular basis. That is really critical, because just having one plan, given the current market at the moment, given the way technology is moving, will leave you behind. If you constantly evaluate what you're representing, what you need to do as an individual as well, you can then keep your finger on the pulse, and then you can be a bit more proactive in lots of things that are going on. And one of the things I would heavily emphasize is work with mentors and buddies. They don't have to be in the same sector as you. They can be in different sectors. See how they're using technology, see what they're doing, and see if there's anything you can do. Because one of the things that we constantly get told is commercials can make mistakes. Nobody will blink. You start a project that doesn't go successfully, everybody wants to know about it. That's the downside of working in the charity sector. You're not allowed to try, you're not allowed to experiment. So working with mentors, buddies, talk to organizations like mine to find out what's going on. How do you use this technology? How do you do this type of fundraising? Then you can learn so much more, and that's for the greater good of the organization as well. So that was the end of the presentation. If you want more information about anything I've presented, as I said, I will be sharing a lot of the information from the presentation, and then obviously the research report. You've got the QR code. Otherwise, I'll quickly open it up for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'll be very
No
comprehensive.
problem. Thank you.
Um, So just a reminder, so along the bottom where the Q&A section is, well, if you press more, because that's how it's showing for me, more and then Q&A, and so paste any of your questions there. So we did get a few questions. Oh, we've got, oh, we did get one in advance. So you were covered quite a few topics, but AI is very much front and center. What are your tips?
Well, thank you. I think the most important thing about using AI is verify. Every fact you get, verify. Don't take it on face value, because you could suffer the consequences of that. Always check the facts. So when you're asking a question, you can ask in the prompt and verify. That's really important. Um, and when it refers to bodies, when it's saying, yes, I've verified it according to such and such an organization, this is the reality of what's there. But go and check that fact as well. Look at the context in which it's extracting that fact as well. And again, don't forget, AI needs to learn over a period of time. It's not just you type something in today, you might get a very different answer tomorrow, because it's learning, it's changing the data, it's looking at, it's enhancing the data, it's looking at. So always fact check. Don't just take it on face value. Even your internal systems, a lot of software out there, including ours, we're giving you AI bundled in, and you can ask questions of that. It will give you an answer. If you're not happy with the answer, tell it you're not happy, and then that sends it to the techie guys, who will then change the model to make sure it's looking at the right facts.
Yeah. It kind of tells you what you want to hear, doesn't it, a lot of the
Correct.
time?
Sometimes,
And
yeah,
sometimes you've got to say, is this correct? I find that a lot
correct.
with just a pure and simple Google search. The AI
Yes,
overview is wrong often.
yeah,
So yeah, verifying, very, very good tip.
yeah. And
Thank you
not
very
just
much.
verifying, check the source that's
Checking the
verifying it as
source. Yeah.
well, because a lot of them will, when you drill through, it's like, oh, there's nothing there. So how did you know it verified? So in the early days, it's still early days, and the AI models are all learning. Just to protect yourself, keep checking.
I agree. Yeah. Good. Um, so everyone wants to be a successful CFO. Is there a way to fast track?
Ooh, it depends on many factors,
Hmm.
because it's about your personality, about the organization you're working with. So I think you can't get away from, doing your core craft, which is obviously learning about finance, etc. But I think talk to people outside. Networking is really, really important, because if it's the first time, I mean, some of the CFOs I spoke to at the round table, they were like, I never recruited anybody in my life, I've always been on my own, I've done everything I need, I've got capacity. And I said, well, so how did you go about? He said, I've got a friend that works in HR, so I just rung them up and they gave me the advice. And I
Hmm.
said, well, what happened when you actually interviews and things like that? This is, they just, they almost gave me a lesson to sort of say, this is how you recruit, this is how you do this. So I think it's worth sort of thinking, what have you got as a CFO? What are the skills you need to learn? What are the things you need to enhance? Look at somebody, is there somebody you admire that has the skills and things that you want to work with, and just emulate those. Try and put in, yeah, there'll be a bit of imposter syndrome, but at the same time, don't forget there's loads of people you in your network. There'll always be somebody that will be able to give you some advice. But again, go and talk to other charities, go and find even commercial organizations. Remember, it's a skill you're learning, not necessarily the sector that it's specific to, but you can go and talk to experts in that specific sector.
Definitely. Very good advice there. So you've touched on metrics. So what is the best thing to capture?
Do you know, I get this asked loads of times, not just about the CFO side. I think if you've watched my presentations with Charity Digital in the past, this is always really hard. One of the things I always recommend is think about, right, what's the output you want? Work on the output you want. Think about what, and then work backwards. What's the data you actually need to report on that? And then you work backwards from there, whether it's financial information, whether it's statistical information. Who are you doing the reports for? Who are you doing the metrics for? And then based on that, start putting something together. Now the danger is, if you do too many metrics, your job just becomes supporting the metrics and just getting the metrics out. If you do the right balance, everyone, all your key stakeholders are getting the right information out of the metrics that you're setting up. Otherwise, I have heard of organizations, and to be fair, I was guilty of it in a former life. It was like, I think I ended up with like 30 metrics, and my manager then just looked at me and went, so you're doing 30 metrics. When do you get to do your day job? Because you're waiting for
Yeah.
everybody else to give you your information to report back to me. So
Yeah,
he was brilliant, because he just turned around and said, no, what's the non-negotiables? What do I do? Once we got this right, then let's start bringing on these other things.
definitely.
And I think the presentation was critical as well. You saw the internal presentation and the external facing presentation. If you don't present the right facts, you're not going to attract the right attention and get enough funding.
That's a really, really good point.
Yeah.
I will do a final call for any additional questions. I think it was just such a comprehensive presentation. Everyone's got
Thank you.
all the information they need.
I'd like to think that, but I'm sure there's going to be a question. And as I said, people have got my QR code anyway, should they want to have more information. So
Yes, absolutely. Um, okay. I think we are good to wrap. So, thank you, Hobby. Really, really insightful session, and thank you all for attending. Got lots more events coming up, including our Digital Fundraising Summit, which is a free online event next month, back for its 8th year on the 14th of May. So I believe a link to that has been placed in the chat. And if you could share your feedback with us, that would be fantastic. The link for that is in the chat too. So it's just really useful for us to continue to develop our webinars to help the charity sector. Thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Hobby, and see you all soon. Bye.